let's introduce you to the candidates. Francie Gorman is from County Laois. Francie is a suckler, beef and sheep farmer from Ballinakill. With his wife Kay, they farm 130 acres and they have one son. His name is Tom. Francie says he will stand up and fight for farmers. If elected, he will be totally committed and will work to make a real difference and deliver for all farmers. Martin Stapleton is a native of Oola in County Limerick on the Tipperary border. Martin is married to Siobhan with 3 teenage children, and together they run a successful dairy farm. Martin sees unity and cohesion as the IFA's greatest assets, and under his leadership, a formidable, unified organisation will again be a force to be reckoned with. That's what he's saying. So, gentlemen, I think you've been briefed in advance. Before we start this morning, we are giving each of you 60 seconds to outline why you believe you should be given the opportunity to lead the organisation. So, Francie, we'll start with you, and your 60 seconds starts now.
Yeah, good morning, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. I put my name forward for president of IFA because I could see over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years that we've become more and more passive in how we represent farmers on various issues. I think farmers have moved out of the space, have been front and central in how we devise policy and how we represent farmers as an association. My ambition would be, when I'm elected president, to put farmers back full and central in the decision making process in the association. There's a lot of farmers out there who feel very affected, feel very disenfranchised from the association, particularly if you come up this side of the country, be they beef, dairy, whatever enterprise. They feel that IFA has forgotten its roots, that they haven't been listening to farmers. And my ambition would be to have an association that gives everybody that carries a membership card equal representation, to get out there, be proactive on the issues, formulate policy, and make sure we can deliver in farm income.
Your 60 seconds is up. By the way, at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening this morning and if you want to get in on this discussion, 087 1200 900 is our text and WhatsApp number. Martin Stapleton, your 60 seconds starts now.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. Good morning to your listeners. I want to be president of IFA because having come through the association for the last 8 years, I believe I can deliver modernisation of the association so that we can meet the challenges of 2023 and for the next 4 years and beyond. Farming has changed radically. The way farming has been supported has changed radically over the last 20 years, and I don't believe that we have radically changed our association to meet the demands of the changes. If you go back 20 years in Ireland, we were focused on producing food. We were focused on increasing the production of food without any consideration being given to the campaign of the environmentalists, whose focus is entirely different. Going forward, this association and farming in general is going to have to combine the need to produce food without any production reduction. It's going to have to combine the need to produce food with our environmental obligations, and I believe that the changes I'll make to the association will place us well going forward.
All right. We'll start actually on the issue of climate change, because what I've been doing in advance of the debate, I've been canvassing widely, just ringing people whose opinions I respect. I didn't ask them for their views on who they think should be the next leader of the IFA, just asking people on the ground here who are farmers in the Shannonside Northern Sound region their thoughts on what they believe we should be discussing today on the show. And Martin, we'll start with you. The climate change, let's go under that heading. It's a huge one at the moment for Irish farmers. And I suppose there are those in the media, including myself, I've been quite vocal on this, who've been saying, when you talk to the ordinary farmer on the ground, nobody is more concerned about climate change, nobody is more concerned about the environment than the average farmer. But they will say they're being misrepresented by IFA leadership. You know, their heads are in the sand. In other words, the charge is being made. You're the treasurer of the IFA. Both of you hold senior positions. The charge is being made that your heads are in the sand. You're climate change deniers. How would you respond to that? We'll start with you, Martin.
There's no way that I could agree that any allegation that I'm a climate change denier. I think that regardless of what your beliefs of what's causing climate change, it's nonsensical for us as a species to think that we can burn and take all of the carbon that's been put under the Earth's crust for billions of years and within the space of 1,000 years put it back in the atmosphere and have no impact. So I agree with your farmers who say that climate change exists. We have to deal with it. The challenge for us going forward as farmers is going to be how we continue to produce food in balance with improving our obligations around climate change.
Well, every time something is put forward, though, you're batting it back, the IFA leadership. I mean, we had it recently with the nitrates issue. And look, the world and its mother knows that our water quality leaves a lot to be desired, and the way we're farming has a lot to do with that. And just as Brussels is trying to do something about it, you're throwing it back at them.
So what I was about to say, Joe, and water quality, in my view, is a different issue to climate change. What I was about to say...
No, they're linked.
They are linked, but they're two issues at the same time involved in one. Climate change is primarily around emissions. And my belief is that far too much weight has been put on emissions from ruminants. We've had, broadly speaking, the same amount of ruminants on this planet for the last 100 million years. There's no significant change. And today to be accounting the emissions, the methane emissions from cattle, as if it's something that's new or something different, that's not accurate, and it misrepresents the contribution of farmers to climate.
Right. Let me use a good old-fashioned agricultural term. The charge is, Francie, that rather than being proactive, you're agitators. You're making life difficult for government and indeed for those in Brussels who are trying to bring about positive change in agriculture that will allow you to continue to produce food, but in an environmentally friendly fashion. You're not prepared to make any change at all, is the charge.
Yeah, I think, Joe, there's a certain validity to that. We are too reactive in how we deal with everything in the association. It's one of the reasons I put my name forward for it. I believe we need to be a lot more proactive on every issue we deal with. The issue around us being climate deniers, I don't believe that. Unquestionably, we struggle to get our message out there about what we're doing at farm level. To suggest that farmers producing food in this country in a more sustainable way than most other places in the world is damaging the planet is a cop-out. 38% of our emissions come from agriculture. We don't have a heavy industry like they have in the Ruhr Valley or like they have an aircraft industry in France to offset them. So our emission figures are always going to look worse on paper. But if we don't produce that food here in this country, it's going to be produced somewhere else that will do more damage to the planet. And what we have to do as farmers, and we're not doing this, we have to be more proactive about how we tell the positive story of what we do in farming. And I think that's where our biggest slip up. We have, in terms of water quality, we have the second best water quality in Europe. And if you look at the results of, if you measure water quality in
I'll have to check that. That's a pretty.
Yeah. And if we
do we have the second best water quality in Europe?
We have the second best water quality in Europe, and if we,
the EPA is telling us that we've a lot to do in order to get our water quality to where it needs to be
better, and that's an ambition we all need. There's no farmer goes out in the morning to deliberately pollute waterways. If we don't have water, we can't feed our livestock. It's the single most important ingredient on the planet for life, really. So if you look at another point about water quality, you measure water quality in terms of milligrams of nitrates per litre of water, and 20%, only 2.5% of our fresh waterways don't pass that test. That equivalent figure in Europe is almost 20%. Right. So we need to get that positive story about agriculture out there, and we're not doing it, Joe.
Okay, and I'll get back to that a little bit later on, because I know both of you have very strong views on messaging and how you get it out there, what have you. Martin, one of the things I got yesterday from people I was contacting, let's be honest, I know you two will probably not want to admit it, but farming over the last couple of years, it's been quite profitable. It's been quite good for a lot of farmers. It doesn't really matter which sector you're in. I know in relation to weather has been a difficult one for tillage farmers, but and in general, beef, dairying, enjoying a reasonably profitable period at the moment. But again, many farmers are saying to me, input costs are rising, incomes, the fear is that they will start to reduce at a dramatic rate. What assurances can you give farmers on that front this morning? That, the efforts you will make to try and make sure that that trend doesn't continue, as in falling incomes and increasing input costs.
And you're right, Joe. There's no doubt about it that for the vast majority of sectors, 2022 was was probably the peak of where we would have hoped to achieve as regards profit. This year, the rising costs, the falling prices, and the difficult weather has made it almost a perfect storm from a point of view of looking forward, and people are worried. I would say, and I think if you want me to be optimistic about the future, we'd have an incredibly magnificent country here for producing food. We can do so incredibly efficiently environmentally, but we can also do so incredibly efficiently economically. So over a long period of time, be it a 3-year period, a 5-year period or longer, Irish farming will always be competitive and will always be able to operate profitably. Our job in IFA is to make sure that the market returns from the vast majority of the food that we produce reflects back into the price that we get for that food. That's our job. And I would also say the supports that we get, we need to focus those far better on the active sectors, on the sectors that need those supports better.
But Francie, the argument could be made, farmers need to learn how to adjust accordingly in good times and bad. It's a business, after all. And as I said, one day you're up, the next day you're down, but you need to adjust accordingly.
Oh, absolutely, Joe. It's a long time ago I heard an old man saying to my father, it takes 7 years to break a farmer. Now, it will probably happen in 2023 an awful lot quicker because input costs and, commitments on farm are an awful lot greater now than they were 30 or 40 years ago. But what we have to do in this country, we export 90% of what we produce. So the cost of doing business in this country has gone off to scale. Regulation at all levels, and it's not just farmers. If you have a shop, if you have a pub, the cost of energy is a huge one. Carbon tax has been applied and been applied in a way that it's just a revenue making machine for the state. That money is not going back in the way it should be, going back to farmers and business to help them meet the challenges around climate change. And in terms of sustaining farm income, there's no doubt, even with input costs very high, last year was a good year across the board. This year by and large is a disaster. What you want your supports and your government to do, your supports need to be there to get you through the troughs, and that's when you expect your government to get onto the pitch and help the industry, and this government is not doing that.
All right, just in relation to issues that are of big interest to the farming community in this region, and I hear this every time there is a campaign for the leadership of the IFA, and the charge once again is being made by farmers in this region. The IFA, they do nothing for us. We're small farmers. They're not interested in us. We pay our subscription. We pay our membership. They're only there to represent the big farmer. And 9 times out of 10, the candidates who run for the presidency are big farmers, farms of 100 acres plus. How can they identify, quote, with a poor farmer in Leitrim? Francie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I farm 130 acres of land. I own 85 and I lease about 45. So I'm very much at the lower scale, if you want to call it, of a full-time farmer. There's no doubt, and I've gotten it when I've canvassed up in the west of Ireland, that particularly in the dry stock side of the house, suckler farmers in particular feel IFA have not represented them. And what we've done, I think, over the past 10 to 15 years is we've taken a passive approach to policy, and instead of coming out and identifying clearly what we want, in case it annoys one sector of our membership, we take a passive approach. We wait till the government come forward with a policy, and for the want of a better description, apologise that we kick the shit out of it. And that's not the way we should be doing our business. We need to be more proactive. We need to identify the sectors that are struggling the most and that need the most support, and get in there and put policies in place to support them.
Martin, you're only speaking for the big farmers.
Nothing could be further from the truth, Joe. And that's, I mean, I'm just saying that.
On the ground.
Correct. And if you went down south and talked to the big farmers, they'd feel the opposite as well. I think within IFA, our duty representing all farmers, and IFA is an experiment that pools the power of all of the farmers coming together to prioritise what they want to achieve, and using that as a united front to be able to make the most of our lobby. Yeah. If we stay divided, we'll fail to achieve for every sector of farming. So we focus on what our priorities are. We got to have priorities first of all, to help out the sectors that really struggle on a short-term basis. In this year, it seems to me to be sheep and grain.
But the priorities in relation to people in this region will say we're being wiped out. There's no such thing as a full-time farmer. We all have small holdings. There's nothing in it for us anymore. Sons and daughters don't want to know. What is the IFA doing to try and change that?
Well, the single biggest mechanism or tool that we have available to us to try and change that is how we distribute our cap funding. That's the single best source of resources that we have in order to change the direction of farming. I would argue strongly that cap funding needs to move away from the direction it has gone, which is convergence, to make it a similar payment for everybody. So that the money is now focused on supporting the vulnerable areas, the vulnerable sectors, the vulnerable sectors in the vulnerable areas. It needs to support quality food production on a family farm, and it also needs to support us, all of us who do that in an environmentally friendly way.
All right, but I've always made, I'm doing this job a long time, I've always made the point, nobody can lobby better than the publicans and the farmers. The IFA mastered the art of lobbying years ago, and they mastered the art of protest years ago. I watched an interview with both of you recently, and I sensed what you were saying, Francie, is it's time to go back to, the protest, standing at the gates, blockades if needs be, back to good old-fashioned demonstrations to get our point across. In other words, you and others are of the view that the IFA has gone a bit soft in recent times.
Yeah, and maybe that's even overstating it, Joe. I mean, you've got to be credible in what you do, and I suppose the point I'm making is that, whatever action has to be taken, I will take if I'm elected president. But you've got to come forward with credible policies first that look after everybody. They've got to be costed, and when I mean costed, I don't mean that we sell ourselves short. We cost them, but we also cost the benefits to society and the economy by putting those policies in place. And we have sold ourselves too short in terms of our asks.
Have you gone too soft, Martin?
No, I don't believe so. I think our essential problem
was the beef crisis a couple of years back not an example of where staunch members of the IFA, I know in this region, said, that's it, we've lost the plot, we're going on a solo run here? Is that not an example of where people are losing faith in the effectiveness of the IFA as a lobbying organisation?
No doubt, Joe, it was, and there's no doubt that a large cohort of our members are not satisfied with our ability to deliver. The point I want to make to you, Joe, is that essentially if we're going to deliver for our farmers in this day and age, in 2023 and beyond, we are going to have to make the argument much better in the public arena to keep the public on side. It is the politicians who make the decisions. They're influenced more than anything else by public opinion.
All right.
That's the challenge for us.
You're both on the hustings at the moment. Only 2 candidates running. And I checked this out. Correct me if I'm wrong. The turnout last time for the IFA presidential election was something less than 30%. So here we go again. Will farmers, ordinary farmers, be engaging? In other words, will they be voting? I see you're offering them a postal vote. I take it that's an attempt to try and up the turnout. What's that saying about the organisation when the turnout is less than 25%, actually?
And just going back to your previous point about farmers not feeling not been represented, there's no doubt that if you go back to 2019, we did not represent beef farmers in the way we should have had. And if you want to call it, there was a gap left in the marketplace, and it was filled. And that's something that I never want to see happen if I'm elected president. Going back to the voting system.
Are you appealing for people to turn out? And well, they don't have to because there's the postal option now. But do you think they'll bother?
Well, look, my preference would be the people that have the option now of either voting in the branch, the ballot will be posted out to them or posted back. I'd love to see people going to the branch, but either ways, I want to see people return their ballot, and I think they will. I think you'll see an increased turnout because
turnout to where 30 plus. What are you expecting?
I think we can get it up to 40%. And Joe, to put things in perspective, that's pretty good in comparison with most votes in this country.
All right. Now, just to say, for the first time ever, as I mentioned, their members will receive their vote in the post, and you can either return the vote by post or cast your vote at your branch AGM. The count itself will take place, I take it, in the Farm Centre on the 12th of December. That's probably the plan.
I think it's the Castleknock Hotel in Dublin.
All right, okay. Yeah. And good luck to both of you. We wish you well. You're in Carrick and Shannon tonight, is it?
That's it.
And then there's Mullingar's coming up, isn't it? Tomorrow night. We wish you well in both at both hustings.
Thanks, Joe.
Francie and Martin, thank you both. We'll take a break.